Ooh, can't see. Alright, sweet. So I'm just sending a link to somebody that wanted to check it out. Sorry, it didn't take long. There you go. Are you listening now? I guess so. Should be. I'm gonna start from the beginning again. Sun hides behind the mountain. One more time, I close the curtain. One last time, back to the darkness, where the lamp will fade. There is no energy, it's still the same. It's still the same. It's still the same. The same is always away. You can't wait, stay. There's growth and decay, and when blue fades to gray, I confess I've been brave. Of thoughts and regrets, I've unpaid my debt. You talk of human rights, all so woke, while I put together pieces that they broke. This lonely child is still so scared of love when it comes to feelings, rather none at all. It's still the same. It's still the same. The same. Anyway, I'll just go to the solo now, because that's where it kind of changes the sound of things. So this is how the drums sound on their own, and this is me playing them. So take I actually play all the instruments in this track. There are many mics used on these drums, but these ones were like,
I just chose the one. I ended up just using a few and going a bit simpler than the setup that I had before. So this is the kick on its own. Okay, here there's already a bit of negating there. Oh, that one sounds pretty nasty. I'm gonna fix that. It's my sidekick trick that usually gets the best sound. Oh, this one was sounding pretty nasty, so let's see what we can do to fix this. There's like a boxiness there that I don't like. But there is a bit of a clickiness that I like, so I'm gonna keep that part. I just realized I wasn't sharing my screen. I like the low end on that one, the subbiness of that one. So what I'm doing is I'm basically cutting down this everything that is killing the subbiness to accentuate the subbiness. that's a bit better. Let's move on to the snare. Maybe needs a bit more bottom. Needs more bottom, I think. I think that when I recorded it like on a console and stuff, so I think I already put some gating and stuff during recording. If you don't know what gating is, it's basically the opposite of compression, so it lets the sound go, happen after a certain point of loudness, which is good for drums to cut out anything that isn't supposed to be what's being mic'd. So that one's alright. Both combined will be like.
Sun hides behind.
Hello Joseph, thanks for joining. So now you're getting it. So now you're getting a bit of snappiness of this mic, which is actually a trick that I use. So now I'm going to talk a bit about like recording choices, you know, which kind of relate to the mixing later. Basically, like when you have like, this is a condenser microphone, so just Schoeps MK4, which means that it this is the capsule, the polarity of a capsule, MK4, and that one is like, it's cardioid, so it gets what's in front of it, and the other mic is a Beyer M201. That one is not condenser, it's a dynamic, and I really like that mic instead of the one that a lot of engineers use for snare, which is the SM57. So that one, that condensers, they react to transients a lot quicker than dynamic mics, and I coupled it with a dynamic which reacts slower to transients, but both together kind of get like a good blend, in which in one you get a lot of crack of the snare, and on the other one you get like more of the tone of the snare, you know. So especially with the Schoeps, like it's so sensitive that it distorts. It's so sensitive that it distorts before it even gets to the preamp, you know. And that distorty sound of is I actually use it to my advantage to add crackiness to the snare sound, to give the impression that there's more attack than is actually there, you know. So you get this. So my goal with this mix was to get something that was like very natural sounding. I didn't want drums that sounded all like fake and stuff, you know. I wanted something that sounded kind of like a drummer playing in a room. So that's sort of what I was going for with the snare. Now let's see what these guys are offering here. The Rack and Toms. I'm just gonna activate these. So mute these so we get to hear only that. Let's go to an actual part that has toms. Should be the ends of sections. So all of these things that you see here, all of these things are edits to make it sound perfect, because I'm not a perfect drummer. There you go. That one, you know, I gotta check out because I did do some processing before here on the chain, but okay. Let's solo this. Let's see. That's my Apollo and switching. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna use not this. I'm gonna use this. I intuitively know how to EQ things on this guy, and before doing so, I'm gonna change the mic because I'm using the talkback mic on my Apollo, and it sounds pretty bad. So I'm just gonna switch to my condenser mic. It'll be just 1 second. Gonna mute my mic for a second so it doesn't blow your ears off. There you go, I muted myself. I had myself muted, that's why. I had myself muted, that's why. I am muted myself now. So I like using this guy in the black most of the time. The tone sounds better. So I want to add a bit more bottom end to that tom. Let's get rid of that. I'm gonna boost the master here so you can hear that better. Now I hear a bit of boxiness there that I want to get rid of. Okay, that's a bit better. Now let's add a bit of compression. Just because it feels like it hits the drums and it just like kind of stays there. It doesn't like, sustain. Just so each hit, like I explained on the previous workshop, what compression does to drums. One of the reasons why you may have drums that don't pop out in the mix is because your spikes, which are the transients, they're there, but the decay is too short, so it doesn't stand out in the mix. The decay is what comes after the attack. So on here, you should see lights going in, which means that there's a reduction happening, which means that it's compressing. All right, cool. Let's see the other one. Okay, that one sounds pretty good. It sounds kind of phenomenal on its own. So one of the reasons why it sounds so good with barely doing anything, and I even used the same EQ that I used on the other tom, on the rack, which is very strange that it sounded so good on the floor tom, but it worked. I was planning on just duplicating the plugin here to choose different frequencies for that tom, but it actually worked out, so I'm just gonna leave it that way. And the reason why I got that sound on the racks is because I used the E22s, the Josephson E22s. They are microphones, they're condenser microphones that were made for using on drums, especially on toms. Like, they sound amazing. They're really expensive. Yeah. that's one of the reasons why I barely had to do anything to make this sound decent. So let's move on to the overheads now, which I'm pretty sure are gonna be fine. And what I used to record that, I used a pair of Coles 4038. They are ribbon microphones, which means that they kind of soften the sound. They're kind of like kill the high end, and I like using that on overheads because it just kills all the annoying cymbally siblet sounds, you know, all these sort of hurt your ear crashes, like kind of softens that, you know. So that's my go-to for overheads, and the Coles are even more so. They kind of like everything above 15 kilohertz kind of like die out on the Coles very quickly. So, you know, they sound kind of dark, and let's see how it sounds. I usually don't really EQ a lot on the overheads because the whole point of the overheads is to, there's somebody in the chat. Yeah, because the point of the overhead is to get like the true drum sound, you know. So I spend a lot of time just finding the perfect spot and moving it around and get like every single drum part, like all the toms, all the, you know, the hi-hat, the snare, and a bit of the kick, everything just there. So I tried different positions, and with experience I just know where to put it. At this point I don't even need to experiment, I just know exactly where the spot is. So yeah, so this is how it sounds. So once again, I hear a bit of boxiness there, which I'm gonna tackle, but I usually don't. So I have a question, like, did you guys notice what I was saying about the cymbals being kind of, you know, kind of muffled out, controlled, and all that stuff? Like, can you hear how you wouldn't have been super splashy, super everywhere? Okay, I guess not. Okay, let's move on to the next part. I was just showing louder so you could hear better. On the hi-hat, what did I do on the hi-hat here? So on the hi-hat, I used another ribbon mic, the M130. So that's another reason. So the hi-hat, if the drummer has a hi-hat that already sounds nice, then I either don't mic it or like I would mic it with like another dynamic mic, like an SM7B or something, or even a condenser mic. Why not? But when it comes to hi-hats that sound, they're kind of cheap, which was the case during this recording. Like I would use a ribbon mic because then it kills it kind of kills the annoying frequencies that hurt your ear. Let's just put it that way. And also this one is a figure 8 pattern, which means that it gets sound from what's directly in front of it and what's behind it. And I use that on hi-hat too, because then I can just put it like this, like hi-hat's here, and I put the mic like this, so it's getting like the back of the mic is getting the top, and the other way around. The front of the mic is getting the top of the hi-hat, and the back is getting the bottom end. And then the null, which means the area of the microphone that's not getting any sound, is in the part that the air comes out when the drummer lifts the pedal on the hi-hat. There's air in there, and it goes like right. So if you put the null there, it kind of kills that sound, and you only get the vibration on top and on the bottom. So that's a trick. Turns out I'm teaching more recording than mixing today, I guess. So let's move on to the bass, which I also used a bunch of mics on. And I actually also used that Coles microphone that I use on the overhead on that amp, on that bass amp. And I used the Bassman amp from the 60s, so very classy stuff. So you can hear that, both microphones being different. From this one, I'm getting more of the finger picking sound, more articulation, and on the other one, I get a rounder bass sound. So let's try different balances and see what kind of sounds better. Interesting. So let's see the third one. If you want to hear, I'm going to say something. If you want to hear this in better quality, because the problem with Zoom is that I can't really talk to you and have good audio. Actually, I can if I do this one thing. I'm going to do one thing differently from what I usually do. Because I'm streaming. So on this link, you can get the high quality audio. And I'm going to put my microphone here so I can talk to you and you can hear through. You can just mute I'll just mute myself on Zoom. And I'll put myself here. Hello, okay. So you should be able to hear me on that link. How do I deal with potential people low-end phasing? So I'm going to mute the Zoom audio here. Actually, never mind. I'm going to keep it on for the stream. But you guys that are on the chat, you can go to that link that I just pasted, because that's going to be high quality. And you can hear me talking because I created a channel here. Of me talking right now. So yeah, like I was saying, how do I deal with people with potential people low end phasing during the recording. I don't really understand the question. Oh, you mean like having several mics and like having that phase out? I don't really understand the question, but oh, okay. Oh, okay. So all these mics were super close to each other, you know, except this one. Actually, the U87 was a few feet away, and you know, because of the 1/3 distance rule in recording, so which means that if you add microphones that are at other distances from the source, like it has to be more than 3 times the distance of that other mic, you know what I mean? Like, so for instance, if I had these 2 mics here and they were like this apart, this is the amp and the mics were like right here, then that third mic that is far away would have to be more than 3 times the distance. Would have to be like at least this 1, 2, 3, at least that, you know, 3 times the distance. So if you follow that rule, you wouldn't have phasing problems, I would guess. That's one of the first things you learn in recording school. At least that was one of the first things I learned in recording school. And one way of judging that is just by recording a section and then seeing if it's actually like, you know, I mean, of course there's going to be a delay here because it was far away, but you can see that there's no direct, like there's no actual cancellation here. And the way you can see phase cancellation, you would have like here where the audio is going negative, like it would, if it was phasing out, this other mic would be going positive instead, and they would both be canceling each other. But there isn't that much. The only canceling region, so to speak, is like this much, which is like quite negligible. Like the ear will perceive that as just being farther away. So yeah, that's my blurb about that kind of stuff. And that being said, let's hear how that sounds, you know. Yeah. Yeah, so basically what you get is more of like what you get is more of like an actual, you know, an actual amp sound, because you're miking what's directly in front of the speaker and the speaker at a longer distance, which means you're getting like the sound of the speaker, of the entire speaker. And that's mostly done on guitar more so than bass, but I wanted to get that sort of tone from that because like that bass amp is amazing. So let's do something here. So I'm busing all of this stuff to the bus here, the bass bus here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my trusty compressor called the LA2A, and I think the silver version would sound good with this. So what's up with that? Why isn't that knob moving? I'm going to add that plugin again. So that's UAD Universal Audio LA2A simulation plugin, and I like it on bass very much. emphasis is like how sensitive it is to low frequencies. So because it's bass, I don't want to like react so quickly to like all the bass frequencies, so I kind of make it a bit less sensitive to that. So when you're mixing stuff that's like has been recorded with microphones, what happens a lot is that you actually use all the microphones together. Like you basically combine the tone of the three of them, and sometimes you EQ it. In this case, I like the tone how it came out the way it is, so I'm not gonna EQ it separately here. And right. So once again, I use this compressor because this compressor adds like the second harmonic to the sound, and the second harmonic sounds pretty good. It's a sweet sounding even harmonic that our ears really like. And just only a bit of reduction, not that much, Okay. So let's see. Got a bit of bass. Now let's take a look at the guitars here for a bit. So overall, it's a pretty good balance, I think, Let's look at each. So this was, I went all out with the miking here. It's like there are mics, so many mics all over the place, but essentially, the regular ribbon on the electric guitar with another condenser, sorry, not dynamic on the electric guitar amp, which in this case is an M88, and then a U87 slightly farther away, and then a pair of ambient microphones, because this was recorded in like a huge room, so these are like pretty far away, and this is how it sounds. And the closer mics are like this. So that's a Fender Telecaster, and I tend to, when I'm recording, I tend to already like, control the tone that I like straight up from the electric guitar. So, EQing wise, I would just add a bit of vibe, because it's kind of like, it just sounds too clean now that I think back on it after years after recording this, And one that I really like is the sound. The Soundtoys Psy-Q. There you go. I have so many plugins, I like don't remember their names, you know. Then let's look at the compression here, you know. So here's one thing: electric guitars. You know, if they're coming through an amplifier, they are already sort of compressed, and so I don't compress it that much. Especially if there's a bit of distortion. In this case, it's kind of clean, so I can get away with it. You know, reducing like 3 dB, and I chose this compressor. It's the solid state version, which means it has no tubes, of the same compressor I used here, which is the LA2A. And the reason why I use those is because they react slow. They use an optical sensor, which means they react slower to the sound that's coming in. So it won't choke your audio, essentially, right? It won't kill the transient. But if I was intending to do so, like, for example, a solo that you want the notes to be like super extended, like actually there's a solo here. There's a solo here that in one part of the song. I'm just gonna go there and show that what I mean. So in a solo type of situation, you do want to have something that takes the sound from the very beginning, from the attack. Let's see what the solo does here if I want anything that's like sustained. Okay, that's gonna work because there's also a delay on the way that guitar was recorded. It has a delay, it goes through a delay pedal, right? So in that case, I do the opposite. Then I use a compressor that reacts very quickly to the transients, that like see the sound that's coming in and lowers the volume like right away. But then what happens is that our brains perceive that as like lasting longer. So all of the decay of each note, all of the sustain and decay of each note gets exaggerated. So you can hear it better in the mix. So here's an example. Okay. And essentially this, you know, like I talked about this on the previous one, on the previous workshop, but this plugin is, the gear in real life is the same. So when you twist the knob this way, the attack gets quicker, which means it's reacting to the sound that's coming a lot quicker. And the release is the same, in the sense that this way the quicker the release is, and the other way the slower. So in this case, I want the release to be very quick, because then it just the reduction happens soon and then it goes back up, and that gives the impression that the notes last longer. So if you want the impression to have the impression that notes last longer, use a quicker release. And if you want the impression that the notes are, that there's less decay on the notes and less sustain, then you do the opposite. Then you use like a longer release. In this case, I want to exaggerate each note of the duration of each note of the solo. So I want the attack to be quick and the release to be quick as well. And you know what I do? I do a lot of bypass and bypass just to see if like I'm not, because your ear tends to trick you, so you tend to like louder things. So I check here. Okay, and when I put this, what's the level? Okay, a lot louder. So, I put it back up. Sorry. So let's do a bit of a being here, with and without. See how both were approximately like the same level? Okay, so those are some tips for the guitar. And let's see, what else can I talk about? So vocals, I already talked about quite a bit on the previous workshop. Casey, you want to say anything?
No, I've just been listening while putting the baby to bed. So I was trying to do it on my phone. It was hard.
I imagine. So yeah, I'm gonna unfreeze this. I'm just gonna finish up because yeah, this one was gonna be a short one, just some tips about mic'd instruments and stuff. So on the previous recording, it was a male singer, so I kind of want to give a tip about female singers, such as myself, which is the person singing on this one. And the thing is that, like, males reach lower notes, usually, that's the case. So when you're doing low pass, of course you're going to do low pass a lot at a lower frequency than this. But in this case, because it's a female singer, I usually leave it at like 100 hertz or so to cut the lower frequencies. And one thing that I didn't talk about in the previous record thing is that what compressors I prefer for vocals, and there's so many different approaches, Here's one. The 1176, if you want something more in your face, it's the one to go. If you want something a bit more, maybe more subtle and more classic, more like, maybe I won't say old school sounding, but Fairchild. And like I explained on the previous episode, I use this for parallel compression quite a bit. It's the Fairchild 670. If you're working with stereo, if you're working with mono, it would be like the 660. And what else? And also there is this one that I really like, which is the CL1B. CL1B. Where are you? Let me get it from the UAD. Right. Where are you? To tech CLB. So there are two versions from the UAD one. And this one, I like it a lot with guitars that are playing, like rhythmic guitars that are playing something very quickly to sort of accentuate the pick pattern. But it's very used for vocals by many people. So I'm gonna put it here and see how it would work out on this type of scenario. Let me get to the part that I actually sing. And I usually like sell these songs. I don't really perform or take them as my own. I just sell the license to people. Ghostwrite, so to speak.
Sun hides behind the mountain.
So this is just like a demo for somebody else to sing.
Sun hides behind the mountain.
So
Sun.
fast attack, more in your face. Fast release.
Sun hides behind the mountain.
And then I usually do the gain compensation, sort of about the same as what's reducing. Like I said on the previous episode, I said the same thing.
Sun hides behind the mountain.
Let's see what happens when you have the other way around.
Sun hides behind the mountain. One more time, I close the curtain.
Usually when you have fast releases, you get a more in your face sound. You get the impression of the person or the instruments closer to your ears. So you know, that's some perception stuff. So I guess I'm gonna end it now because I had different plans and I had to improvise this workshop today because I couldn't get the files for the ones I was planning to do, unfortunately. But you know, those are some tips for today, and maybe next time I can dig a little deeper on the mix. And yeah, have a good night. You and people watching the stream on YouTube. Bye bye. Hey, Casey.